healing is almost, I think of it like an onion that has layers. And when you think about going through your journey, you go through different layers when you're ready to face and kind of dive into certain things that you've been through, especially with really traumatic moments. A lot of times for individuals, there can be some blockage there or just kind of shutting down those parts of you, those memories or experiences. And so it's really just being gentle with yourself, but taking those steps, step by step, day by day, year by year, undo those layers of healing. Because I think where I was right out of high school versus where I am today is very different. And what I feel really comfortable to explore and talk about, and even just allowing God in to bring those deeper healing. And so that's where I think about a journey. It's over a lifetime. It's not like you just go one session or a few sessions and then you're done and you're healed and you're better. It's a constant journey.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the process of Christian sanctification, where we continue to grow in our maturity and our faith. And as a result, over time, our character becomes more Christ-like. And I think the same can happen with emotional healing, where it just
Absolutely.
takes time to learn about what happened to us, maybe why it happened to us, how it affected us, how we can move through that. Hey friends, before we dive into this awesome episode, I have a question for you. Did you know that faith is a powerful tool to improve your well-being and help you overcome childhood traumas such as abuse, neglect, and family dysfunction? Based on some research I did, it's true. And I know you'll want access to this little discussed, yet highly empowering information. So I created a free video called 3 Powerful Ways That Faith Increases Your Well-Being After Childhood Trauma. I not only explain how Christians have a faith advantage, but how you can harness the transformative power of God in your healing journey. It's free and available for download now. Just click the link in the show notes to free gift or use the QR code shown on YouTube to get your copy now. Welcome to the Room to Bloom podcast, equipping you to live redefined, renewed, and restored. I'm your host, Julie Rebboah. Let's tackle this week's topic. To another episode of the Room to Bloom podcast. Today I have special guest Joanna Torres. Today we're talking about, am I worth healing? Because sometimes we're not quite sure. But today she's going to help us learn about what trauma-informed care is, what trust-based relational intervention is, and if that might be a possible avenue for you to heal, because you are worth it. So welcome, Joanna. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you do?
Absolutely. So I have been working in the mental health field for about 20 years, providing direct services to various clients, families, individuals, children. The last 7 years, I've been working in the foster adoption field. I am working with families that want to adopt, so training them and preparing them for the adoption journey. I myself am an adoptee. I was in a foster care system when I was younger, from 3 until about 10, and then 11, I was adopted. So that's a little bit about my journey.
Okay, so it sounds like you have a lot of experience, both personally and professionally, with fostering, adoption, and childhood trauma.
Yes, I definitely experienced a variety of traumas through my childhood. Starting off when I was 2.5 years old, I witnessed my mom getting murdered. And so that was an extremely traumatic moment for me as a young child. And then going into the foster care system, being in, various foster homes, I experienced abuse as well, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and even just the journey of being adopted was difficult. There was good and bad in that journey of adoption. So that's kind of added trauma that I also went through.
So now you're on the other side of that. You've gone through a lot of healing, but it sounds like some of that trauma you've experienced would be considered complex. What is complex trauma?
So, complex trauma is when an individual experiences multiple events of trauma. So, that could be repeated abuse, repeated violence, exposure to violence. So, oftentimes, families that have domestic violence in the home, children being exposed to that is considered a traumatic event. It can be interpersonal violence, even to the point of racism, community violence. So, those things that are repeated, it's happening over a span of time for that individual.
So, how would that differ for somebody who has complex trauma versus somebody who has PTSD? How is that different?
Well, people that experience trauma typically can often have the diagnosis of PTSD, whether it's just a single traumatic moment versus the complex trauma. It's pretty common for people to experience those type of symptoms of PTSD. So whether you've only had one single event that happened to you, or you've had multiple events that have happened to you, it's very common to still, on both scenarios, experience PTSD.
And so, for people who have either PTSD from one event or complex trauma, would informed care be the right fit for both of those categories?
So, with trauma informed care, that is really focusing on looking at how trauma affects the behavior of an individual. So, how that trauma is affecting their ability to have interpersonal relationships, affecting their ability to learn, their ability to just function day to day. So, trauma informed care is being sensitive to those things and looking at how to support that person and help give them the tools to heal in those areas so that they can function and they can have, healthy relationships, and pursue the things they want to in their life.
Okay, well, thank you for that explanation. Very helpful because I know that
Mhm.
that term might be unfamiliar to some people. Many think that all therapy is the same, and it really isn't. And so, a trauma informed provider might be a better fit for someone who has experienced any kind of trauma to help them move forward. And so, in your life, how has your complex trauma affected you on a day-to-day basis?
So when I was a child going through foster care system, for me, I definitely was experiencing PTSD symptoms. So having nightmares, repeated nightmares, struggling, being very sensitive, hypervigilant, easily scared, easily frightened by things. And it really struggled with learning, through school. School was incredibly difficult for me. So being able to focus, being able to retain information was a real struggle for me. And that's how, for me, that affected as I was growing up and going through school. Interpersonally, I did okay, but certainly there was a little bit of a dysfunction there as far as understanding what love is and how to receive love, how to pursue love. And so that's where therapy came in to help kind of heal that and help me to learn how to better go about those things.
So, how did you begin to heal? What steps really worked for you?
So for me, I was introduced to God and faith at a very young age. I was 8 years old when I started going to church. This is with my adoptive family. And so having a faith journey was helpful. Also, just continuing to pursue therapy in different ways, different types of therapy, to see what was going to help me really kind of dive deeper into my trauma and the things that I experienced so that I can find healing. And I will say, holistically, having both faith and traditional therapy is what really helped me come to a place of full healing.
Yeah, I agree with you that therapy can get you to a certain place, but
Mm,
God's really the one who can dive down deep and heal those wounds that maybe you don't even know were there.
right.
And so I wholeheartedly agree with you. So you describe healing as a journey. Could you tell us why?
Healing is almost, I think of it like an onion that has layers. It's layers. And when you think about going through your journey, you go through different layers when you're ready to face and dive into certain things that you've been through, especially with really traumatic moments. A lot of times for individuals, there can be some blockage there or just kind of shutting down those parts of you, those memories or experiences. And so it's really just being gentle with yourself, but taking those steps step by step day by day, year by year, undo those layers of healing. Because I think where I was right out of high school versus where I am today is very different. And what I feel really comfortable to explore and talk about, and even just allowing God in to bring those deeper healing. And so that's where I think about a journey. It's over a lifetime. It's not like you just go one session or a few sessions and then you're done and you're healed and you're better. It's a constant journey.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the process of Christian sanctification, where we continue to grow in our maturity and our faith. And as a result, over time, our character becomes more Christ like. And I think the same can happen with emotional healing, where it just
Absolutely.
takes time to learn about what happened to us, maybe why it happened to us, how it affected us, how we can move through that. And that takes time. So I really appreciate that you said be gentle with yourself, because parts of it can be difficult.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times people feel that they want to get over something or they want to feel better or be healed. And so they get very discouraged if it's not happening right away. But, I feel like God knows when we're ready to face certain things in our life. And it has to do with maturity and just personal growth, spiritual growth that gets us to a place where we're ready to face those things, like I said, and dive a little deeper. And so that's why each year you get a little braver to face certain things and you're willing to step into certain things to say, okay, what can I do to even help myself heal? Where do I need to change? Because sometimes even through experiencing that trauma, because we develop certain behaviors, ways of surviving, ways of coping, right? And so over time, those things then become ineffective. So we have to learn, okay, what's a new way to function, a new way to cope with these things that I'm struggling with. And so that comes with that maturity and journey.
Yeah, thanks for expanding on that. So, what would you say for someone who's been resistant to the idea of healing and they're scared because they have to open up that wound a little bit to get in there? What would be the first step that you would recommend towards healing?
I think the first step really is finding somebody that you can trust to just talk even on a surface level. So if it's a pastor or a close friend and just saying, I want to talk about something that I went through or experience, that's kind of like that first little baby step is finding that safe person to start opening up a little bit. And as you start to talk about it, you get a little braver. And then finding a therapist, searching for a therapist that is trauma informed, has that specialty in trauma that you can start that journey to start looking at healing that history.
I think what you said is key, that we need to find someone who is safe and trustworthy. And sometimes you can gauge that by what their reaction is towards what you've just shared a little tidbit with. And so, do you have any thoughts on how we can better gauge that?
That's a good question because sometimes when someone has experienced a lot, we don't always interpersonally know like who are safe people, who are not safe people. But really, a safe person is someone that's really going to listen, not there to fix you or tell you what to do, but just there to care and to listen, and to give you a space where you can just openly share what it is that you want to talk about. There's no judgment. There's no trying to tell you what you should and shouldn't be doing, but just more just being there to listen and to support you as you share.
Yeah. Okay. So great insight, because I've tried to share with people who didn't end up being safe, and they begin with, well, oh, you need to do this and you should do that. And it doesn't end up being productive or helpful. Sometimes it can actually be hurtful. And so use a little bit of discernment and wisdom and test the waters a little bit before you share even more. But a therapist might be a great choice as well, as you said.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, why do each of us have to decide that we are worthy of healing before we can even begin to do so?
Well, when we think about, God created us for a purpose. Each of us are unique. We're an individual. We're here for a reason. And God says that we're precious, that we are loved, we are chosen. So looking at it in that light that, what, I am worthy, step into a journey of healing. The enemy wants to steal us and rob us from our future. He wants to rob us from our purposes. And so leaning in on scripture, leaning in on the truths of what God says about who we are really guides us to then say, what, I am worthy to be healed because you are. No one deserves to suffer. No one deserves to be in a place where they're really stuck in and not feeling that they're thriving in their life. Jesus says in the Bible that he comes to set the captives free. And it's not just free from sin, but I think I believe, free from trauma, free from the pains and the hurt that we've experienced in our lives. And so allowing him into that journey really helps us to take that step forward to say, okay, I'm worthy of this.
Yes, I agree that that verse you quoted also means free from everything that is holding us back from the abundant life that God wants us to have. And yes, it's free from our own sin, but also free from the sin that was imposed upon us. Jesus' blood covers it all, and freedom is what he wants for his people. And so I just love that you shared that verse because it's also one of my favorites. So I wanted to ask you, we were talking about trauma-informed care and trust-based relational intervention. Could you explain a little bit more of what those are and how they differ?
So trust-based relational intervention, I absolutely love. I'm trained in that. I'm a practitioner for that. And what I love about it is it really focuses on connection with the individual. So creating security and safety to and help. So with trust-based intervention, it's helping like the child or the individual have a connection with them and that they're going to be able to be there to meet their needs. With all behaviors, there's always a need that's trying to be met, whether it's an adult or a child. And so TBRI is all about creating that safe connection and that trust that that person's going to be there to meet that need as they're supporting them and helping them. Where trauma-informed care is a little bit different because it's more being aware of the trauma and creating an environment and space that's safe for them to explore that trauma and start that healing journey, where TBRI is a little bit more focused on that connection, creating a healthy connection, a safe connection, and then ensuring that those needs are being met.
Thank you so much for sharing the difference because that might also be a type of care that many people haven't heard of yet. And those two types of treatments might be really beneficial for someone who's experienced any sort of trauma in their lives. So let's talk about forgiveness and healing, because when we were speaking before, you mentioned that that was really an integral part, but it's also a really difficult thing for people who have experienced things that seem unforgivable.
For myself, my personal journey, the forgiveness and taking that step into forgiving really helped me find some freedom and be able to really step into that journey of healing. When we forgive, it's not about excusing what something was done or saying it's okay that they did this, but it's really setting you free from a place of continually being hurt over and over and over because you're thinking about what happened, and it sets you free from bitterness and anger, resentment, which would be natural things that come up obviously when you've experienced something that was so traumatic and unfair and not okay. But the forgiveness piece is really that it helps you detach from the emotional trauma of it in a way where then your heart can really heal. And then as you heal and you say, okay, I'm going to choose to forgive this person and release myself from that traumatic event. It then allows you to reflect back and think about it without the pain of what you experience. You can actually talk about it, you can reflect about it, you can share about it, and you're not experiencing that deep pain that you once did before. Forgiveness is really more about you than it is about the other person, because it's setting you free and helping you kind of detach from that experience so that you can really have that deeper healing.
Okay, so you're the first person that's spoken about forgiveness from terms of being able to detach yourself from the emotional trauma. And so I really love your take on that, because who doesn't want to be detached from the pain of that emotional trauma? That's something that everyone who's experienced it wants freedom from. And and it does seem so counterintuitive that we want to hold on to the anger and bitterness because there are valid reasons for feeling that way. However, hanging on to that may also continue to harm you. Would you say that unforgiveness might contribute to additional toxic stress?
Absolutely. And it's hard. I mean, I just want to say this to listeners, like it's not easy to step into that place of forgiveness. It's a baby step by baby step process to move towards that. But it does, if we refuse to forgive or refuse to give ourselves that opportunity for healing, it does. It keeps us in really toxic, unhealthy cycles. and we get very stuck in where we're at. And then at that point, really, healing is our responsibility. What was done to us was the responsibility of the other person that harmed us, that hurt us, that rejected us, whatever it was. But then our healing is our responsibility. And so it's up to us to take those steps to then move beyond that. Because if you think about it, you've gone through just this traumatic moment. Years go by, that person's not thinking about you. They're not even giving it a second thought. But here you are continually mulling over it, thinking about it, angry, bitter, whatever that is that you're struggling with. So then you're harming yourself at that point. So forgiveness helps you to, like I was saying, it unleashes that link that you have to that memory to where you can then really have that deeper healing and then just learn, like I said, learn healthier behaviors, learn healthier ways to coping, learning how to have healthy relationships.
So, how can faith bring even deeper level of healing in addition to someone who's already gone through some therapy and has learned some new skills? And how would God come into that and really
Yeah.
dive deep?
It's interesting. Faith is also a journey, right? A journey of learning about who God is, growing in just trusting Him, which sometimes is hard, especially when you've experienced really traumatic stuff from those who were, your parental figures, right? Because God's looked at as a father. So sometimes that can be a little tough, but integrating your faith, God can go deeper than what traditional therapy. I feel like in a way, therapy can definitely dive deep into things, but God is like, He can come in and remove and redeem and restore us in a way that traditional therapy really doesn't. And when we allow God in and we continually hold hands with Him in that journey, changes our perspective. He gives us a different vision of things. He helps us to see things in a very different light. Jesus was very radical, right? When He was on earth and He was doing His ministry and His work, He was so radical. The ways that He approached things was not like the world did things. So when you include God into that journey of healing and journey of forgiveness, it allows God to give you a perspective in a way of approaching things that is very radical and very different from how the world would look at things and approach things.
Yes, I agree with you. Jesus was radical, changed our perspective on things, can change our perspective on ourselves as well, especially when we don't feel like we're worthy of being healed. He comes in and, look at who He redeemed in the Bible. Look at His disciples. They weren't people that the religious elite felt were worthy, but Jesus said, yes, you are. And so many of us who feel that we are unworthy, Jesus is just waiting for us to take His hand, as you said, and walk with Him. In my own studies, I've learned that faith can increase a person's resilience to traumatic stress. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so having faith and including God in that journey, it does give you a certain resilience that's almost undescribable or it's hard to explain to people. I've met people and I've shared my story so many different times, and I commonly hear people say, you don't act like someone who's been through what you've been through, like you don't come across that way. And I was like, it's because of God. I really give so much credit to Him. He's given me this resilience and this ability to overcome that is almost unexplainable. It's almost like a supernatural way that God just moves in us and in a way of operating through life that isn't like how, the regular world might operate.
I agree with you. I think God operates supernaturally. And I've also gotten that response myself from people who are shocked to find out that I have a history of childhood trauma, and it is all God. He's the one who comes in and says, you're my precious child. I love you. I'm going to restore you. I'm going to redeem you. And now I'm going to send you back out into the world to go help other people because He is that good. So for someone who's listening, who is really struggling with that thought that I'm not worthy, it's too late for me, what would you say to them?
It's never too late. It's never too late. All of our journeys start whenever we feel we're really ready, and God knows. And no matter how old you are, you can still step into that place of forgiveness, that place of healing, and just starting that journey to give you the best life possible. God working in our lives is never limited to age or time. He's always there to walk alongside us. Therapy is for everybody. I don't care if you're 10 years old or if you're 80 years old, it's for everybody. So there's never a time where it's too late. It's just, again, believing that you are worthy of that and you deserve that. And to give yourself that opportunity to experience that healing and freedom is so important.
So, for people who might have experienced adoption or foster care or orphanage life, do you have any words of encouragement?
As I've worked with kids in the past that have gone through the foster care system, I understand that feeling of you don't really belong or you don't fit in. You lose your family, you lose the people that you love, and you're placed with people that you don't really know. So for those, I would say that you are so worthy. You are worthy to be loved. You're worthy to have connections with people. One of the parts of my journey is that I did have my family and I loved my family and I still consider them my family. And I've forgiven them for the things I've been through. But I found family in other ways through my church, through great friends, through friends' families. And so oftentimes we can expand the places that we fit in and that we belong and that we're loved. So if it's not happening with maybe that foster family or adoptive family, if you're feeling that those things aren't connecting, you can still find that in other places and find that sense of belonging and love. But we're so worthy of love and so worthy of acceptance and all the things that everybody gets to experience in life. We are just as worthy as anyone else.
So, what would you suggest as places where people could find additional sources of connection that might be more meaningful to them?
It could be church, whether it's church groups, attending services. There's support groups out there that you can get involved with. There's even like meetup groups. There's certain things that you really love doing, activities, experiences. There's meetup groups where you can meet other people that have shared interests. And that's where you can really start to kind of build your sense of community, building those people around you that you find that you connect with and that you enjoy being with.
Okay, so great recommendations. So, church and interest groups, support groups, things like that, where people have common interests and maybe even common values. So, yeah, great ideas. Now, for people who are listening who might be foster parents or adoptive parents, how can TBRI, the trust based relational intervention, potentially help the children that they're working with and caring for?
What I love about it is it taking that approach really helps parents understand their own attachment, how they attached maybe when they were younger. So then looking at then how are they trying to create that attachment with their current child, especially a foster or adoptive child. Those tools that we learn through TBRI really helps you approach some of those more challenging, difficult connections or challenging and difficult behaviors that you're seeing and understanding that there's needs that are trying to be met just in unusual ways because of their trauma, because of the things they experience. And so it really gives you great tools on how to just approach it in a different way where it's not through anger, it's not through frustration, it's not through thinking, oh, they're a bad kid, but really it's just, this is a child that's really been hurt and wounded. And how can I meet that need in a safe way so they feel loved, they feel connected and supported?
So, how could anyone, whether it's a listener or a foster or adoptive family, find someone who is credentialed in TBRI?
So the Care and Purpose Institute of Child Development, you can all go to her website. I believe they have a link in there to see within your community people that are certified in TBRI practice. Or you can even do a search, just TBRI practitioner in my area, and they should bring up people in your area that provide that type of support.
Okay, great. So I will get that website from you and we'll put that in the show notes. So, do you have any additional words of encouragement for people who have experienced trauma and are struggling with worthiness, but they really, really desire healing?
What I would say is that there is hope. There's always hope for being somebody who has walked that out in her life and have experienced such deep healing and have really experienced a place of healing and freedom. It's possible and you can get there. It's just taking that first step. And like you were saying earlier, just believing that you are worthy because you are so worthy to be healed. You're so worthy to love yourself and to receive love from others. It's scary at first. There's a lot of fear that surrounds that, like taking that first step. Like, I don't know if I want to go to therapy. I don't know if I want to talk about this, but really pushing yourself to do that so that as you keep taking steps, it gets a little easier and a little easier and a little easier, that journey. one healing after another will happen. It will happen for you. And you can have a future where you're free of that pain and that suffering that you've had.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It is a little scary at first, but it does get a little bit easier. And that's really where we get to the place of freedom. So, Joanna, do you have a favorite Bible verse that you'd like to share today?
I've always loved Jeremiah 29:11. That's always been such a favorite, that God, He has plans for us, a plan in the future. I just love that, just knowing despite the things that we've been through, despite the things that we've experienced, God has a future for us, and there's hope for us in our future.
Yes, there is. So if you're watching Joanna and you're thinking she really has been healed and you want that for yourself, I just would encourage you to get plugged into some therapy or some trauma-informed care, some TBRI, and really start connecting with God, because He knows the best route for your healing. He knows everything you've been through. What has broken your heart has also broken His, and He wants to partner with you in your healing. How can listeners find out more about your TBRI coaching services if they're interested in working with you?
They can connect with me through my Facebook or my Instagram. I also have an email address that I can share. We can share in the notes. They want to reach out, and we can connect that way.
All right. Well, we will get those in the show notes. So thank you so much, Joanna, for sharing your personal experience, your professional knowledge. I know that it's really going to help people seek maybe a different form of care that might be more effective for them.
Definitely.
All right. Well, God bless you and God bless your work. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Julie. It's great being here today.
Thanks for joining me. I hope this episode has blessed you. If so, please subscribe, comment, and share. It's a great way to spread the love and keep good content rolling. As a reminder, this podcast is purely for informational and educational purposes only. Listening to content is not a replacement for medical or mental health care. Please make decisions with your personal care providers. Stay tuned for next week's episode. But if you want more content or free resources in the meantime, head over to FromBudToBloom.com. See you next time. Until then, live fully free in Christ.